Turn record on for all the broadcasters, so that should be activated now for you. We're going to go straight to Keith down here at Sky Sports.
Hi, Steve.
Keith, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. We go again.
We certainly do. I've missed you all. I've missed you all so badly.
I'm sure you have. Can we start with your injury call, Steve, after internationals? Have you seen all the lads yet?
Yeah, they're all okay. Of course, the doctor's been in touch straight away after the game. Everybody's returned okay. We all knew Jamal Lewis was returned earlier. That was already pre-agreed, and he's fine as well. So yeah, all good in that front.
And good for you as well, Ryan Fraser getting a couple of starts for Scotland and the winner the other night as well.
Yeah, great news for him, because the one thing that we did need with Ryan was, of course, and I had a conversation with Scotland, was just to be careful with him, because he hasn't played since last March. No competitive, and not done a lot of training either. It's okay training on a treadmill and running in straight lanes, but actually physically working, playing football. So yeah, it's done him the world of good, and of course, to get a winner and play well the way he has done is great news for us and him.
How close is Martin Dubravka to return, Steve?
Well, he's still. It's been reported, of course, that there's been a setback with him. We see it more that we thought he might be a little bit more advanced than he is at the minute. He's not. So we never really put a time scale on somebody who's had an operation. But it's fair to say it's slower in his recovery than we would have liked. So we're not going to put a time scale on it. We've got to let nature take its course. As I said, we would like him to be a little bit more advanced, but he isn't. So we'll just we'll have to let nature take, as I said, let nature take its course.
And Alan Saint-Maximin, I think he had a bit of a knock, didn't he, before the international break? Is he okay now with the rest?
Oh, he's jumping around, a nice new pay deal and all the rest of it. He couldn't be any happier at the minute, that's for sure. And we're delighted. We're delighted the lad's committed his future to us. We've all seen what an impact he's had. Certainly in the 12 months he's been here, he's been excellent. So long may that continue. I still think his best years are ahead of him. He's only 23 and still learning his trade a bit, but we're delighted that he's committed his future to the club.
You've just answered my next question for me. I was going to say he seems pretty happy given his social media activity these last 48 hours.
Well, as you probably know, I don't do social media, but I get to hear about it now and again. And I do believe he's a bigger star on social media than he is on the pitch, isn't he? So typical of Alan, he's a really, really bright lad and intelligent lad as well. And I think he's great to have around the place.
I mean, he was happy. I think we know he was happy anyway. But to know that he's as happy as he is now that he's had this sorted out, it looked like you were getting the best from him anyway. But do you feel now that he can go from strength to strength, that he's got his future sorted in the way he wants?
Well, we've all seen him play. We've all seen him play for the last 12 months. And when you see him last week, the goal he scored, the one he set up, there's arguably only him on the pitch who could do them sort of things. So there's no disputing that he's got a natural ability. Of course, he's got to be a bit more consistent, and he's got to learn and got to be a little bit more disciplined at times. However, he's got the world at his feet. As I said, he's only 23-year-old. So he's got hopefully his best years ahead of him. And of course, when he matures, we all hope that he can turn into the player that we can all see, and that is week in and week out, and then turn into. And as I said, he's got everything in front of him if he keeps learning and wants to do the right thing.
We know, Steve, that you've got a few players there that are surplus to requirements. Do you expect anyone to leave before 5 tonight?
Well, it's been very quiet, so you can never say never. But it's been very, very quiet on that front for the past couple of weeks. We've had 1 or 2 inquiries, but that's about it, really. So disappointing for the lads who obviously need to go and play. So we'll see what happens in the next few hours, but I would doubt it.
Just a couple on Man United from me, Steve. Obviously a shocker from them last time out against Spurs. What sort of Man United do you expect tomorrow?
well, they'll be deeply upset and disappointed. That's for sure. So you're hoping they'll definitely want to erase that memory. That's for sure, of last week. And let's not forget, they've got some really, really top players in their team. So, you always fear a backlash. Of course, they've been beaten in the past, and it's how they respond. And what makes them the big club and great club is in moments when they're in at the minute, that they come out and show what they are. So I'm expecting a really, really difficult game. They'll be wounded and disappointed of what happened a couple of weeks ago. And as I said, make no mistake, they've got some top players in the team. So we'll have to play well if we're going to get something, that's for sure.
One of those top players, Steve, is Harry Maguire. You know him better than most. You obviously signed him from Hull and have helped him to get to where he is. You were also the former Man United captain yourself, played the same position. Can you understand what he's going through? Is that maybe weighing heavily on his shoulders a little bit?
Well, the one thing about playing for Man United and being the captain especially is that you're under the spotlight and everybody scrutinises, especially these days. Back in my day, 20 years ago, there wasn't quite the scrutiny as there is today. Mm-hmm. But make no mistake, he's a level-headed lad. He's had a wonderful rise. For where he's come from and what he's done. And he's mature enough to handle it. I'm convinced about that. And he's level-headed enough to handle it. And it's the first time he's probably had a blip. Now, the sending off the other night, that can happen to everybody. But of course, with Harry being, what he is and his fantastic rise to where he's got to, has bore the brunt. So he has to batten down the hatches like we all have to when you're under the pump. Batten down the hatches, do the basics well, but underneath it all, you never lose your ability. And he's got he's a big player, and he'll be fine. I'm sure of that.
You must feel, though, the way you guys have played in recent weeks, that you can get at him and get at Manchester United tomorrow.
Well, that's what we've got to be. We've got to try and be a threat. And what we've got at the top end of the pitch, I hope we can be that. We've certainly with Alan and Joe and Callum, I do believe that we have got a threat to them. And we have to try and do that tomorrow, So, yes, we're going to have to defend well, for sure. But can we cause them problems going the other way? And let's see what we can do.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.
Thanks, Keith. Vicky Sparks.
Hiya, Steve.
Hi, Vicky.
Just going back to Alan Saint-Maximin briefly, I thought it was really interesting that he name-checked your head of recruitment, Steve Nixon, on social media, thanking him personally, and also just saying that thanking Steve for taking the time to understand him. It was just nice to see that particularly come out, because we don't always see all the behind-the-scenes stuff that people like Steve Nixon does. Yeah,
of course. And let's be fair, Steve Nixon was instrumental in bringing him into the club. So and was involved with the player regularly when we were signing him, and it's somebody now that Alan can associate with behind the scenes, and we all want, when you're a young player, and you're certainly somebody like Alan, when you're 22-year-old coming from France and trying to settle into your new surroundings and get used to what the Premier League's got to offer and this, that, and the other. So. Steve has been quietly behind the scenes, always trying to look after him a bit, and that goes for all my staff. Because obviously, our big aim is to keep every player happy. That's the key to it, if we possibly can. Behind the scenes, nobody sees what goes on, but the way we look after them in terms of housing. We've even got somebody who pays all their bills, for goodness sake. It's quite remarkable. We feed them, pay their bills. We practically do everything these days to look after them. So, but it's certainly worked in Alan's case.
You wish you had that when you were a player?
Oh, well, I've never had anybody pay me gas bill, that's for sure. Or pay a car park fine or whatever. But with Glenn's desk and Tony's desk, it's always full to the brim. You've got no idea.
I mean, he's clearly so ambitious, Alan Saint-Maximin, which is such a plus for the club that he feels he can do that here. I mean, he's the one that's brought up David Ginola, says that he wants to follow in his footsteps here. Can he do that, in your opinion?
Well, there's one thing that we're not going to deny. He's got the ability. Now, he's done well enough for the club to reward him with a new 6-year deal. Now the next step for him is to go and really and be, part of the history of this great club of ours. Can he be a David Ginola? He could be anything he wants to be. Let's be brutally honest. He could be anything he wants to be. I hope in time that little bit of maturity, which will surely come one day. And yet alone, we've got to have that maverick in him, which makes him the player that he is. He does things which are just off the radar. He scored a goal I wish we had had on tape. He scored a goal in training the other day, which was just ludicrous at how good it was. And I think we all applauded, so we know what he's got in terms of ability. It's the next step up to it, that maturity that surely will come to him, and then he's got the world at his feet.
Just on Martin Dubravka, obviously frustration if he's going to be slightly longer than you expected, but one positive is that Carl Darlow has come in and is playing well. We spoke to him earlier this week and he said he was relishing this chance that he's got.
Well, he's waited patiently, hasn't he? Especially under myself, when Martin got injured, then the lockdown came and Martin got fit again during the lockdown. But the one thing he has done, he's trained every day, he's waited for his chance. And of course, then you have to try and take it. And touch wood at the minute, he's been terrific so far this season. I couldn't have been more delighted with it. I mean, his performance at Tottenham, he made a save against Burnley early in the game last week, which was critical down to his left-hand side from McNeil, I think it was. I'm very, very pleased with him, and I hope that continues.
And on Manchester United, you touched on it earlier with Harry Maguire, but you're somebody who knows the expectations at that club, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as well, from being a player there as well as a manager, knows the expectations when you're managing that club as well.
Well, the expectations are big enough here at this club, but you can multiply them when you're at somebody like Man U, and if you're the manager or the head coach or you're the captain and the centre half, then you come under the scrutiny and under the pump, as I call it, very, very quickly. And of course, I always fear when they've had a bad result, because usually they come out all guns blazing, and that backlash is what we've got to be wary of. They will be disappointed, I'm sure. And the one thing that you can get over when you had a bad result is the next game, and they've got us next time up. So we have to be ready for that and ready for the challenge. And we're quietly confident. Arguably, in the 18 months I've been here, the game against Man U was arguably the highlight, where you put a young player in, scores the winner, and the last 15 minutes in St James's Park, they took the roof off to make us hold on. So I wish 52,000 were coming tomorrow, unfortunately, and do with their help, but we'll try our utmost to see if we can get another result against them.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Dawn Thewlis. Just need to unmute you, Dawn.
You can't.
Hiya.
There we go. Morning, Dawn.
Steve. Hi. You mentioned that last Man U game, Matty Longstaff's goal there. Where is Matty at the moment? Is he sort of back on the road to fitness? Is he training?
Yeah. Thankfully, he's trained the last week, 10 days, and not had any reaction at all. So we're planning on Monday. The Mondays play Fulham in the under-23s. So we play him in that alongside Kieran Clark and alongside Paul Dummett. It's an ideal time to let them have 90 minutes if we can. So, yeah, touch wood, Matty looks as if he's on the road to recovery. So does Dummett, so does Clark. So big game for them on Monday afternoon.
And as you say, Man United, the wounded lion syndrome. Basically, you just have to be totally ruthless, don't you, really? Well,
we have to play well and be wary of that backlash. In history and tradition will tell you of a club, they've had some poor results in the past, but they've always come out. That's what a big club is. And so we'll have to be wary of that, of course. And we have to play well against them. We have to defend like we did last year against them, because up the top end of the pitch, make no mistake, they've still got some wonderful football players. However, we do think we can cause them a few problems going the other way. So let's hope we can play well in that department too, and repeat last year's result.
Can I just ask you about the project Big Picture and the Premier League's decision to reject that? Do you think that was the right decision?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it's important that if you're in the Premier League, that you have your say, and if you dilute that power into the so-called Big Six or wherever it is, then I don't think that's the right philosophy at all. A club like ours, playing in the Premier League with our history and tradition, wouldn't have a say, and that's not right. So I do believe it was flawed. We're all for trying to help out the lower divisions, that's for sure, especially in the way they are at the moment. And for me, yes, we're all under restrictions, but when I see Arsene Wenger holding an event this week in London in the big venue where he was, the Royal Albert Hall, I believe it was, or whatever it was, might be miscorrected. The Palladium. And you can't tell me that we can't put fans in a stadium and have them socially distanced, being sitting outside, and that from the government would help. All of these smaller clubs at the minute. I mean, they survive on gates of 3,500, and probably most of them have got a 10,000-seater stadium. Surely we can let some supporters in and be socially distant, sitting outside in the freezing cold. That would be the way forward for me. And let's hope over the next few weeks that we can get that. We started it, of course, a month ago, and then it was unfortunately pulled to bits. But we have to try and help these smaller clubs if we can. Otherwise, I think a lot are going to go out of business.
And you've actually said that for a long time now. But the fact that so many of the EFL clubs were really willing to accept it just shows how desperate they are.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're going to be. I think I've said it many times. I spoke to the Gillingham chairman, no income coming in and a budget of £1.5 million a year. Well, he has to try and find that somehow. So it can't go on forever. And, the history of our football has been, we want to try and say, 92 clubs is too many. Well, hang on a minute. They've been around for and the small club is as much to the community as the big club. So, and I'm on it because, without the small club, I don't think I would have had the career that I had. And the small club gave me my chance. And we have to try and help them, of course, but I think the government can help it as well as by having a look and letting a few supporters back into the stadium and let us police it. When we can go to the cinema or we can go to the pub or we can go to a restaurant, surely we can police a stadium where we're socially distant, where we can let some supporters into the ground. Surely that would make a bit more sense.
Finally, obviously, the Premier League has sort of offered this £50 million package to Leagues 1 and 2, who now apparently rejected that because they say they want something that's going to help the Championship as well. It's a really difficult position because obviously some Championship clubs will be direct.
It's a really look. It's a really difficult and when you look at the Championship, of course, there's a lot of them are in desperate trouble. A lot of them in trouble because they've maybe overspent. But we've got some wealthy people who in the Championship who get punished for spending as well. So it's a really difficult situation. And my thoughts on it, we've got to try and help, especially the clubs in Division 1 and 2 where it is part of the community in the smaller areas. And of course, we've got to try and help the Championship. How we try and police that, manage that, it has to be managed a little bit better. And, it's a really frustrating time for everybody concerned because the key to it in my eyes, is to let a few supporters in the ground, which surely we can police.
Steve, thanks very much. Good luck at the weekend.
Thanks, Don. Chris Conway.
Morning, Steve.
Hi, Chris.
Just following up on that point about getting the fans back into grounds. I mean, it is astounding, isn't it, that the government can just sort of say.
Well, look. I can go to the cinema tonight, can't I? I can go to the pub as long as I can go before 10 o'clock. I can go to a restaurant at 8 o'clock, and I can mix with people who are 5 yards inside of me. I just find it staggering. I really, really do that. With what we've got in place in the stadiums and. We've got huge stadiums around the ground. Now, I'm not saying you pack it to the rafters, of course not. But surely we can let, especially for the smaller clubs who only depend on probably 2,000-3,000 people in a stadium where arguably might hold 8,000 or 10,000. So surely these clubs are ready to police it. We've seen it. We've seen it with them schemes that they had. Did Cambridge do it? And I think if we looked at it, especially now with the winter, the people getting dressed up, and making sure that they're outside, it doesn't make real much sense to me at all.
And just on big picture, I mean, it was quite astounding when the reports first emerged. I mean, it strikes you of sort of arrogance of the big six for them to think, well, we're the most important ones, we should have the most say.
Well, I don't agree with that at all, and I'm glad that the Premier League has gone along with that. I mean, of course, the top six are the top six, but you can't have them just policing everything. So I'm glad it's been rejected. A big club like ours wouldn't have any say in it, and that can't be right. So I think the 20 clubs, wherever it is in the Premier League, the 20 clubs need a voice, and I think that's vitally important. And I was quietly confident I would get thrown away like it rightly should have done.
Can you, did it bear thinking about what the league and what the footballing world in this country would have looked like if it had somehow managed to get through?
Well, I never really looked at that, because when I looked at what was going to entail, I was never expecting that the other clubs in the Premier League were going to allow it. So for me, it never had any legs. So I didn't really take much notice of it, And look, I'll take this the right way. I've got enough on my plate rather than the politics of football. I've got enough to pick a team and try and play against Man United and try and get a result, rather than look at the politics, which is thankfully for other people.
And we'll not talk about the politics of the real world that we're living in at the moment. But
thank goodness.
The few lads who are available for loan before the sort of deadline today, I mean, they must be disappointed that there hasn't been any sort of firm or concrete interest in them.
Yeah, they need to go and get their career up and going, but they're difficult times out there. They're part of a big Premier League club, so they earn decent money, and of course, we would do deals with other clubs, that's for sure, but the phone's got a ring for them. So I'm sure they're disappointed as much as we are that we can't seem to get them fixed up, unfortunately, because they need to get on with their careers. And that's the awful side. It's not their fault that they're working hard and trying to play as best they can, but we haven't had any takers just yet.
And just last one from me. You mentioned before there about, that these players today even get their bills paid for them and they get help with all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, as an old school manager yourself, that must make your eyes roll. I mean, you're in touch with reality. Do you feel like they're perhaps not? They lose something because they
old school. I've been thrown that out many, many times. Old school. You got to roll with the time. Somebody's going to pay your gas bill. You let them pay it. Come on, get in the real world. That's the way it is. Come on. It's the perks of being a modern day footballer. Everything is done from you. We do everything we possibly can, and that's the way it is. That's the way. It's what they expect, and that's what they're brought up with these days. Parks of being a Premier League footballer, wonderful.
Wouldn't have happened a few years ago, I'm sure.
It certainly didn't. It certainly didn't.
Okay, thanks, broadcasters. Written titles will be with you in just a moment. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function now. Thank you.